Sunday, July 5, the Gospel of the Cross. Paul says that the message of the cross is the power of God to us. It is not surprising that Jesus Christ and Him crucified is the center of His preaching. Read 1 Corinthians 1:17 through 31. What important point is Paul making here? For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom and eloquence, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, the intelligence of the intelligent I will frustrate. Where is the wise person? Where is the teacher of the law? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God the world through its wisdom did not know Him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards, not many were influential, not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before Him. It is because of Him that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom from God, that is, our righteousness, holiness, and redemption. Therefore, as it is written, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. In 1 Corinthians 1:18 to 31, Paul deals with the contrast between human foolishness and divine wisdom. The cross has the power to display the worst of man and the best of God. This section of 1 Corinthians is introduced by the statement in 1 Corinthians 1:17. Because the cross of Christ is not supposed to be emptied of its power, the message of the cross must occupy the central place of our preaching. Paul says that he was sent not to baptize, but to preach the gospel of the cross. This statement requires two important observations. First, the Greek verb translated as to send is apostello, which stems from the same root as the word apostle. Thus, Paul's fundamental apostolic task was the proclamation of the gospel. Second, Paul's words about baptism did not mean that baptism was not important, or at least not as important as preaching. He was instead rebuking those who made a big deal out of who were the ones doing the baptizing, as opposed to the one Jesus into whom they have been baptized. By wisdom of words, Paul is not implying that eloquent speeches are bad in themselves. The point is that human wisdom should not obscure the message of the cross. This phrase refers to Greco-Roman rhetoric. In Athens, Paul used logic, science, and philosophy, but this resulted in little fruit. So, quote, he decided to follow another plan of labor in Corinth in his efforts to arrest the attention of the careless and the indifferent. He determined to avoid elaborate arguments and discussions, and not to know anything among the Corinthians save Jesus Christ and Him crucified. End quote. Ellen G. White, The Acts of the Apostles. In what ways can elaborate discourses obscure the message of the cross? Why did the proclamation of Jesus Christ and Him crucified produce more fruit in Corinth than logic, science, and philosophy did in Athens? Might there, however, be times that logic, philosophy, and science could be helpful in proclaiming the gospel?